The Grim Tale of Grace Macabre, Chapter 49. Grace's mind swirled and her heart ached. She had allowed herself to be tricked too easily by Ari. She was terrified at the prospect of fighting him. She doubted herself. But she saw the logic in testing her abilities by killing the crawling man. "So, how do we find his lair?" she asked. "The crawling man likes to be close to children," Ian said, scanning the information on the site. "But he also needs to be near a forest because that is where he'll build his nest." Nevermore was a coastal town with beaches that spilled into the Atlantic Ocean. However, to the north, west, and south they were surrounded by deep forests. Grace turned to Ian. "That really doesn't help. Nevermore is basically smack in the middle of Dunwich State Park. That's a lot of area to explore. We'll never find him." "We have to find him," Sarah said. "Is there anywhere here in Nevermore close to the forest that maybe has a bigger population of small children?" Ian's eyes shot wide. "Annabelle Lee Trail." "That makes sense," Grace said. "That's the new subdivision they built last year, along with the new elementary school." "Right," Ian said, pulling up a map of Nevermore on his phone. He looked at the location of the abductions and saw a pattern. 2 of the kids were from Annabelle Lee Trail. The other 2 were within a couple of miles on each side. The crawling man's lair has to be somewhere in the woods around Annabelle Lee. "Good job, Ian," Sarah said. "Find us anything that can help us with how to kill this thing." Grace was anxious. This was really happening. She was about to go into battle with a monster. She drew strength from Sarah's confidence and Ian's excitement. Sarah turned to her. "We've got to go now. If we don't find him before dark, he will take another child." The Grim Tale of Grace Macabre, Chapter 50. Detective Jeff Martin sat at his desk, which was in danger of collapsing from mounds of paperwork stacked atop it, and wished that he could have a cigarette. His wife had recently conspired with his cardiologist to take that habit away from him, which was the only thing in his life that brought him a measure of calm. Jeff had been experiencing chest pain ever since the child abduction started. He chalked it up to the intense stress he put on himself to catch the crawling man. However, 3 weeks ago he came home after another 18-hour day and collapsed. His wife, Darlene, had been waiting up for him. She smiled when Jeff entered the den, but her smile faded when she saw how tired he looked. There were dark circles around his eyes, and his face was covered in a sheen of sweat. She had jumped up from the chair just as he faltered, nearly collapsing. She was able to help him to a chair, and, being a nurse, was able to triage his symptoms. She suspected stress and a lack of sleep, but just to be safe, drove him to the emergency room. The attending physician confirmed her suspicions and revealed the diagnosis of arrhythmia and chest pain, which Jeff had been hiding from her. A few days later, after meeting with a cardiologist, Jeff found himself on a healthy diet, and smoking was forbidden. He had also been taken off the crawling man case and relegated to desk duty until the school shooting happened. And he'd only gotten assigned to that case after agreeing to let Jacob take the lead. However, he was also secretly still looking into the crawling man case. So he sat, chewing gum instead of smoking, and considered the most recent abductions. 3 young boys and a girl named Harmony. And a few days ago, less than 100 miles away in Savannah, 10-year-old twin girls named Cindy and Sandy Evans. He felt the abduction of the twins was not directly related to the others. It had a different feel to it, and happened in another city, yet for some reason his gut told him it tied somehow to Nevermore Hollows. "What's that look for?" Detective Jacob Quill asked as he entered the office he shared with his partner. Jeff scowled at him. "What look would that be, Greenhorn?" Greenhorn was what Jeff called Jacob, even though Jacob had been a detective for 5 years and an officer of the law for nearly 15. "Well, you look even more curmudgeonly than usual. What's got you in such an even fouler mood?" Jeff leaned back in his chair. His tie was askew and his shirt was wrinkled. "The Macabre girl has disappeared." Jacob took a seat at his own well-organized desk across the room. His shirt was pressed and his tie straight with a tight knot. "Is that group of kids she started hanging out with still in town?" "Yes," Jeff said. "I found that they're called the Runaways by the other kids. I can't believe they slipped under our radar. They live on the edge of town in a big house, no adults. They each share the same last name, Battaglia, which clearly isn't the truth. They all work at the pit. And other than that, I can't find anything on these kids. It's like they have no background whatsoever." "That's interesting," Jacob said. "When was the last time we knew of Miss Macabre's whereabouts?" "I tailed her to the pit yesterday. She stayed there until around 3 this morning, and she got into a car with Ari. He appears to be their leader, and they went to the old McGee mansion over in Ligeia Estates." Jacob had become accustomed to his partner working on cases without him. "She spent the night with him?" he asked. Jeff shook his head in disgust. "Yeah, she did, and from the looks of it, she was drunk when they left the bar." "Everyone I've spoken with says Grace is a good girl," Jacob replied. "She's not the kind to sleep around or use unstable boys like Justin to commit murder. And her psychological profile and her past actions support the idea that she's a good kid." "Well, we have to follow the evidence where it leads," Jeff said. "If she isn't guilty, then eventually the truth will be revealed, right?" "Yeah," Jacob replied. "So how did she go missing?" Jeff leaned back in his chair. "She took off this morning to the hospital to see that hero kid, Ian Black. While she was there, she met up with that girl who called us about the handwriting." Jacob leaned forward in his chair, clearly intrigued. "Sarah? You found her?" "Yes, Sarah," Jeff said. "But I didn't see her. I tailed Grace to the hospital and watched her go into Ian's room. I stepped over to the nurse's desk to ask how the kid was doing, and after getting an update, I went into his room. It was only him there. Grace had gone." "Well, what makes you think that she took off with Sarah?" Jacob had his elbows on his neatly organized desk, his strong, dark hands clasped together. Jeff shook his head in disbelief and said, "Ian told me that she had shown up and convinced Grace to go with her somewhere." "What?" Jacob said, unclasping his hands and motioning for Jeff to continue. "You look like you don't believe him." "Well, the kid told me that Sarah and Grace had run off to fight a monster." Jacob looked confused. "Monster?" "Yes, a monster. That's what the kid said." Jacob shook his head. "As in a paranormal kind of monster and not the human monster you and I deal with every day?" "That's what the kid said," Jeff confirmed. "A paranormal, real-live monster. I think they have the kid on too much morphine for his pain." Jacob nodded in agreement. Maybe so, but I've met his family. They're not prone to concocting crazy stories. Even if Ian is feeling the effects of pain meds, he doesn't seem the type to say something that wild. Jeff reached out and grabbed a tepid cup of coffee, took a sip and grimaced. You don't think he's prone to crazy stories? Let me tell you what else he said. Go on, Jacob said. He said the girls were going to fight the Runaways because they're demons. Crazy, right? The kid is speaking nonsense. Either way, we've got to move on this now, Jacob replied. Why didn't you call me? Jeff fixed Jacob with a direct stare. Because I needed time to digest all this. If he is in a drug-induced ramble, then it has no merit. Come on, Jeff. You know better than that. Whether we want to admit it or not, this town is strange. Creepy, even. We've both seen some unexplainable things, even though we don't believe in the paranormal. Maybe now is the time for us to keep an open mind. Jeff reluctantly nodded. I know we have. And it seems strange cases are becoming more frequent, almost the norm around this place. But damn it, I don't want this to be one of those cases. Either way, Jacob replied, Grace is with Sarah, whom we know absolutely nothing about. We don't know if she's a threat or a friend, so we need to find them. I know, Jeff said. He stood, grabbed his wrinkled jacket, and started for the door. So we have to at least take Ian seriously enough to believe that Grace and Sarah are going to confront the Runaways. Jacob stood. You believe him, don't you? You think Ian is telling the truth. You think these Runaways are demons and that these kidnappings are done by a monster. Jeff shook his head. I didn't say that. So what are you saying? I'm saying what you said a minute ago, Jeff replied. We live in a town where some very strange things have been happening, some of them very dark. You remember when we found that clearing in the woods with all the satanic crap? And what about these black-eyed children that have been popping up? I hate to say it, but we can't rule anything out at this point, and these are dark times in Nevermore Hollows. Jacob followed Jeff down the hall. Where are we going? Jeff glanced back over his shoulder at his partner. To the lair of the demons, just to check it out.